Hello, and welcome to our latest episode of Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. My name's Craig Burtwhistle, and I'm delighted to have Felix Lehmann as our guest this week. Felix is one of the world-leading experts in Cognigoals, deep learning. Felix has his UA for B and is International Director of Coaching for Cognigoals. How are you doing today, Felix?
Good, Craig. Doing good. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure. I'm really excited about this episode because I really want to learn more about the Cognigoals. It's an area that I feel I could develop in. So before we get into that, Felix, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What got you interested in football?
Yeah, it goes a long way back, Craig. Actually, one of my first memories is playing one v one in our family garden with my dad. So football's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I then went on to play football in the club here in Germany. When I was 6 years old, I joined my first team. I love dribbling. It was my biggest passion. My dad tells me that in our first game, I dribbled past all 11 opponents. We actually played 11v11 back then in Germany. And I did that twice in the game. Once I missed the goal, and then I scored the 1-1 tie. Yeah, and I played the next years. Actually, then my focus shifted for a number of interesting reasons to basketball. And I was a very good basketball player up to the age of 16, 17. Then I actually had very, very tough back problems, which made it impossible for me to continue. Fast forward a few years, I'm studying in Germany in university. I want to do sports. So I remember my passion for football. And so I said, okay, I want to play, but I don't want to just be an ordinary player. So what I did is I got myself a DVD by the German Federation, the DFB, which was called Ballzauber, which means like ball magician, and an old VHS by Wheel Curver. And I went to the park actually for about 2 years every morning at 5, 6 a.m. And I practiced and trained for 1 hour. So, and then I played on 3 different teams from work, from university, and from church, and just always trying to improve. And that was a bit the beginning of my coaching, actually training myself, a very strange story. um, rediscovering my passion for football at an adult age. And then also fast forward another years, and my son starts playing soccer. And then after a couple of years, his coach says, we need an assistant coach, and can one of the parents please help? So my son said, Dad, you're always there. You play soccer. Why wouldn't you want to do that? So that's the beginning of my coaching. I became assistant coach of I think it was a U10 or U11 back then. And after a year, the coach decided to focus on another team because the team my son wasn't that great. And that was when all the parents said, "Oh, can't you become head coach now?" And why not? And actually, around the same time, one of my best friends, same thing happened to him with his son. So both of us, we decided to get enrolled in the UEFA courses. And so for the next years, we went to Malente, which is the famous place where the German team prepared for the 1974 World Cup, which we ended up winning here in Germany. And I got my training up to the UEFA B license. That was, I think, about 8 years ago. And that's I continued with my son's team, started specializing in cognitive training almost right from the beginning. Did a certification as a visual and cognitive coach in 2017 at the Sportschule in Hennef, Sports School in Hennef. And during COVID, actually, that was when I decided to focus 100% on cognitive training. We founded Cognigoals about 5 years ago, together with former FC Bayern Munich coach Matthias Nowak, who's one of the best technical and cognitive coaches in the world. That's a bit of background. Could always tell more, but before this talk, I told you I have this tendency to be very passionate about what I do. So let me stop there. And
Yeah,
yeah, what else would you like to know?
you're not going to get any pushback from me for that because I love speaking to passionate people like yourself. I was really fascinated by the fact that it sounded like you were a coach before you were a coach, which I
Hmm.
thought was fascinating. The getting up at five o'clock to go do those DVDs and work on that individual training. That seems like it was probably before even knowing it your pathway to what you're doing now, which I find
Hmm.
absolutely
Hmm.
fascinating. So how has that impacted like your motivation in your career from starting from that as a player and blending into a coach?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Another thing is I've always loved to work with young people. So there was a short episode when I was about 17 years old, and they asked me to become coach of the basketball team at my school, the German school in Washington, D.C. at that time. And I really loved that. Um, I even remember getting a technical foul against myself in one of the games because I was a bit too passionate back then. And
Been there.
yeah, I loved working with young people. Um, there's a funny episode at that time. I got an earring, and all of my players got their ears pierced. So the parents weren't too happy about that. Now, fast forward to my playing experience and to my self training in that park. What it really taught me, Craig, was the importance of focusing on details, on technical details of different football, soccer moves, right? Because I printed out every one of the exercises of that Balzauer DVD, and I had a map, I carried all the exercises with me, and I made sure to go through it in slow motion, step by step, to learn all these moves. Okay. Yeah, I think the observing myself how I learned was the best way for me to learn. It taught me a lot of how to feel and observe what my players go through when they learn our exercises, right? And for several years, I also did some work with young people and children at church with my wife. I'm teaching university courses to young people. Um, so a lot of involvement with young people. It's always been a focus. So I think yeah, for many years I had what you might call a coach's heart. I just like being there for young people. I like them. To discover their dreams in sports, to find out how they can be the best that they can be, but always, yeah, like a support and help perspective. Okay, I try to find out their motivations, try to understand the way they feel, why they are playing soccer, why they're doing sports, why this is important to them, listening a lot to them. So yeah, it's definitely helped me a lot. Yeah, to learn about soccer myself, and that way to be able to understand how the players learn. The reason actually I switched from soccer to basketball at 10 years of age, I just been in New Jersey in Princeton for a year with my parents, and I came back to Germany. I'd loved playing soccer up to that point. I was a striker. I scored most goals in my teams. If you look a bit in the background, let me shift the camera a little bit. There on the wooden desk, you can see a plaque, which my coach had given to me as a gift. It says, please remember the U11 of the VKS SV when you're in the United States. I came back. I had another coach, and that was one of those, yeah, sort of, yeah, what would you say, old generation German coaches. So he yelled at us, he humiliated us in every training session, and that was actually something that when I had two friends at school who said, "Hey, why don't you want to play basketball?" So at that time, I was already 6 feet two. So I was tall for my age. I said, yeah, I can try basketball. And I was always somebody who knew how to move really well. So I adapted really quickly into basketball, became a really good player quickly. And honestly, I had no, I didn't want to go back to playing soccer with this coach yelling at us, humiliating us. Now, you know how things sometimes come back to you. Uh, like 20 years afterwards, when I was a coach with my team, one day, we're playing another team. I welcome the team in their dressing room, and there's this small man, and I come into the dressing room, and he yells at me. He says, "Oh," and I look at him, and that's the coach from 20 years back who made me, for a bit of time, lose my love for soccer. So
So
that
he
was
hadn't
an
changed
interesting.
at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually during that game, which we ended up winning 7-0, he ran into the pitch and he wanted to hit one of my players. And and one of my parents is a martial arts master, so he like walked in the field, he picked him up and he carried him off. So it was had a bit of a comical side to it.
Oh my God.
But what did that teach me, Craig? It taught me you have to, if you want to be a coach, you have to understand the young people that you're working with. You have to know a lot more than that what you observe on the soccer pitch. You have to find out, mm, what are they going through in their families? How is their family? How are their friends? How is school going? What motivates them? What do they love? Who are their idols in the soccer world? So you have to ask a lot of questions. You have to take a lot of time before training, after training, and you have to learn how to listen, really listen, to get to know each of your players. Because there shouldn't be any favorites, but if you deal with a team, you have to deal differently with every player.
Yeah.
Each one is an individual, and so if they feel seen, if they feel heard, Craig, then they'll end up becoming the best player that they can be, and then they'll end up on the soccer pitch, giving it all, also for you as a coach. That was something that really, as I mentioned, the team of my son, when I took over, it was a very mediocre team. Nobody wanted to train it. Also, the club that I worked for, the largest grassroots club in my state, it was known for mediocre teams. And we ended up winning several championships, even a double, winning a cup against a team 2 divisions higher than we were. And that was because the players that I trained, they became such a strong unit. They were fighting and running so much that nobody wanted to play us. So, and that, I think that goes back to listening to them, really caring about them, having a coach's heart. So that's apart from the work I do with motor cognitive training, communication with players, really valuing them. A little episode I might want to share. I had a player who's an exchange student who's now living in Washington D.C. actually, a great young player who was here on an exchange. And he got into some trouble for something he did. I'm not going to mention it here on the podcast, but I ended up going with him and really, helping him to apologize, getting things sorted out with the police. And I just talked to him 2 weeks ago. It's actually his birthday tomorrow. And he said, I'll never forget in that situation. Nobody was on my side. You were the only one who, stood by me, who talked to my parents. I'll never forget that. And those are things, I mean, it's always great to have success and to win games, and but this experience, this human experience, as I might call it, I think this is one of the things that makes coaching really special. And if you get that kind of feedback, you're not doing everything wrong.
I couldn't agree more. I think the biggest takeaway I took from like your sentence there was the coach that like you dreaded being with and almost ended you leaving the game, and he hadn't changed. The thing that I try and explain to coaches is make sure that a player follows you because they respect you, not because they fear you. Because the
Yeah.
fear will only get you so way. The respect will take you a lot further. And the fact that you took the time when you were younger to understand what those players are learning by doing it yourself, and then stepping into their mindset and saying, this is why they do this is what, and also showing that human side of you and being caring when your player got into trouble, giving him the opportunity to have someone that's there. When you get that sort of like bond with a player and with a team, they'll run through brick walls for you. It's
Yeah,
amazing stuff.
yeah. The quote I love most, Craig, is um, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So it's all about, if you take over a new team, it's about winning the players' hearts, not being some kind of authoritative person who shows how much you know, but really making them feel that you care, that you want their very best. And if they really, really feel that, as you said, then they're ready to go through a brick wall to leave it all out in the pitch. And actually, that correct, that's what makes the experience special. That you form a unity with your team, that you're in it together, and it's especially something that's shown most when you lose. My son, who was part of my team for several years, he was always making fun of me, saying, "Oh, Dad, when we lose, we've never played as well as when we lose. The things you find that we did." So he was sort of accusing whenever we lost, which wasn't really didn't happen all that often, but that I would always find good things here and good things there. So it sort of sounded like an accident.
It's you win or you grow is the way I was always
Yeah,
told.
yeah. True.
So I love that. So Felix, we'll be back after a short message from Zencaster. Do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at Session Share. Zencaster makes it super easy to produce a high quality broadcast with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, you knows, and 22 other speech patterns. Zencaster makes it super easy to produce a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster. Welcome back. We're going to talk now about Felix's big passion, and that is Cognigoals. So, Felix, can you tell us about how this was created and what the brainchild was behind this?
Yeah. One thing that I observed very quickly when getting started as a soccer coach was that many players struggle using their weak foot. So at that level that I was, training grassroots, the weak foot was quite an obstacle for many of my players. What I thought was, and that's a traditional way to teach. How can we get players to improve their weak foot? It's through touches, touches, touches. I talked the other day to my friend Tom Bayer, and we said, what's the traditional way? It's to start as early as possible, to get as many touches as possible, and to use the right technique. So I included lots of exercises and game forms where I would sort of force my players to only use the weak foot. Even in a match preparation, there was a game for which I would use, and the players would only use their weak foot. Only weak foot. They hated it. They
So that
hated
was
it.
during the warm up, was it, for a game? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
during the
wow,
warm game.
excellent. Yeah.
So they hated it. They hated it, but I was convinced, also from my basketball background, where you have to be able to do everything using both hands, I said, this can't stay that way. Um, Another thing was that whenever I've been doing something in my life, I always try to investigate what are like new things, innovative ways to do stuff to really improve. So, I'd looked at technical training of wheel curver. That was something I applied myself. Guardiola had come to Bayern Munich. So tactical training was the latest. We'd been through the experience of Jürgen Klinsmann preparing us for the Sommermärchen in 2006 in Germany, bringing over athletic trainers from the US actually. So during my research, I found out that almost all coaches agreed that the next big thing was cognitive training. That the biggest improvements were possible by helping players, their brains to process information more quickly, more precisely, and to train the brain. So I said, okay, interesting, interesting. And I looked, and I found a guy called Kevin McGreskin, who had something called Soccer IQ. I found a guy who had called in Germany, Horst Lutz, applying something called Life Kinetic, which Jürgen Klopp brought into Borussia Dortmund later on. So looking at different concepts of cognitive training. Now, what I liked most was what I saw Matthias Novak of Bayern Munich do, because the way he trained the brain of his players back then at Bayern was through different movement tasks with and without the ball. And what I saw was very easily applicable to my training sessions. So I introduced, short spurts of cognitive training into my training sessions with my team. And like a half a year afterwards, I was observing one of our games, and a couple of other coaches from my club had come to watch the same game. And so one of the coaches asked me, "Can you tell me why your players are always one step ahead of the others?" And I hadn't really thought of it that way. But that feedback from the other coach showed me that the training that I'd been doing for 6 months then, it was actually, showing some effect. So I got more and more interested in that. I bought all the DVDs by Matthias Novak. I even did my own mind maps to, create a structure and a system out of all his DVDs. And I kept, experimenting and in every training session, that was a central part of what I was doing with my players all the years that I was a grassroots coach. And, I contacted Matthias Novak as I had some questions. I'm not a shy person. If I want to know something, I reach out. It doesn't matter who you are. I'll start asking you stuff. Yeah, he invited me to the certification course, which I mentioned at the sports school in Hennef. That was in 2017. I went there, I met with him, and I started to, yeah, I'd say I kept asking the same question. I said, this is great, but where's the structure? Where's the system? Because I studied law at university, so I'm a bit of a systems and structure kind of guy. And so I kept asking him, and we said, okay, there's movement tasks with the ball, without the ball, movement tasks using different aids like the coordination ladder. And yeah, I don't know if you know the Sens ball of Michel Bruniks, which is the small ball on a court, which they use in the Belgian Federation, a really nice tool actually. Um, and um, and then there are the chaos and creativity of game forms. And I said, yeah, but Matthias, if I start with a player, what would be step one? What would be step two? So during one of our walks, he sort of looked at me, shook his head, and said, "Okay, you create the system. Please go ahead, leave me alone. Create the system. Come on, man,
Yeah.
get off my back." So and that's when we founded Cognigoals. And I sat down with him, and for hours and hours. I mean, Matthias is like a bit like a second wife to me. For we've ever since then we've become best friends. Not a day goes by where I don't get voice messages by him. We keep experimenting. We're always working on this, always sending each other videos, and keeping this always moving and getting better. He's a very demanding kind of genius guy, so you can't just send him any exercise and he'll be happy. He always wants to get the best out of it. That's a Bayern Munich spirit, which he just carries within himself after 8 years at the Siebener Straße. So we sat down, and that's actually, Craig, when we got back to the subject of two-footedness. Because we said, you know what? The modern game, if we want to create a new generation of players, they need to be two-footed. Because the greatest deficit, even at the professional level, apart from cognitive skills, is the lack of two-footedness. I always use the example of a well-beloved player who's just finishing his career, I think at almost 40 years of age, Lucas Podolski, who everybody knows. And I mean, he's one of the most one-footed players that exists. He only has a left foot. So um, okay, so we said, how can we go about it? And we sat down with our scientists. We're working together with Torbjörn Festberg, one of the most foremost scientists in the research about executive functions in sports and football. Thomas Schack, Ludwig Vogel, scientists we've worked with very closely for almost 10 years now. And we said, okay, we know you should start early. We know lots of touches might be good or are definitely good. We know it's about the technique, but why aren't we able to develop players that are really two-footed? Because that was my experience with my team also. The players had improved their weaker foot. But Craig, then in real game situations, and you can see it in every game at the professional level every weekend, when there's pressure, okay, little space, little time, lots of opponents, even the best players in the world, they use the wrong foot all the time. And that's why is that? So I asked our scientists, why is that? Well, it's really easy. When there's danger, then we resort to that what we feel most comfortable with, which we feel most secure with. Okay, so our scientists said we have to change the brain of our players. If we really want to make them two-footed, we have to make them feel as comfortable on their weak foot as on their strong foot. And the only way to do that is to change the way they feel in their brain about their weak foot. And that was, Craig, when our comfort zone principle was born. So let me explain what we do. During the first module, we take the strong foot out of its comfort zone. How do we do that? We use a very simple exercise, the outside-inside hop, to get started. It's nothing more than the outside-inside move, which you know and which are part of any technical training all over the world. But our scientists said you have to add a hop. Now, why is that? That's because that way it becomes a whole new movement. So the brain feels this, perceives this as something new. Okay, so there's actually something new happening in the brain. Then we add on different cognitive add-ons. So there is the famous rabbit and hunter, which you might have seen. There's pinky and there's piano. You know, so there's many different. There's clapping of all sorts, crossing the arms like Mbappe. And so we put on these cognitive add-ons. And let me tell you, doing that simple exercise with these add-ons and hopping, I've seen players, professional players, which were not able to do it. Very interesting because they've never done this sort of training. And so they move out of their comfort zone. They actually improve their strong foot because it's being challenged and challenged a lot. And then when the coach says switch, the player moves the ball over to the weak foot. And there on the weak foot side, there's no cognitive add-ons. There's only outside, inside hop. What happens? The player perceives this as relaxing, as comfortable. There's a new comfort zone that develops on the former weaker foot. And now imagine, Craig, once you switch over, then you have to do the rabbit and the hunter. Next, you switch over, then you have to do the pinky. So if you start pouring out those cognitive add-ons on the strong side, this starts getting really stressful. And you know what happens, Craig? The players start staying on their weak foot. Not because I told them to, but because the brain wants this good new feeling. It wants to relax. It's sick and tired of the stress that I'm putting on the strong side.
So to go
And
back to your previous comment, it's now perceiving the weak foot as the comfort side is what your
yes,
brain is actually
yes,
saying. Yeah,
yes,
love
yes.
that.
That's why we call it the comfort zone principle. Our scientists call it that way, and it's fascinating. I mean, I'm very slow of calling things calling things unique or special, but this is actually something. It's a complete game changer, and I have, if I turn my camera, you'll see about 500 to 1,000 DVDs and football and soccer books, which I have here. I'm a bit of a freak because when I get into a subject, I love to read and study and see everything. And this isn't anywhere. This is really new, and it's a real game changer. And without exception, Craig, players, professional players, youth national team players, after one or two training sessions with me, they tell me my weak foot has never felt so good. And I was actually among our team, I was the skeptic, Craig. I said, yeah, sounds good in theory, but as I'm not a scientist, I'm a coach. So I remember preparing Annalene Böhler and Hannah Günther, two German youth national team players, and I started testing these exercises with these two girls. And they both said it. Annalene, a right foot, Hannah, a left foot. And they both said, oh my God, my weak foot feels incredibly well. And it wasn't just in training, Craig. It was after a couple of weeks that they would tell me, I'm using it a lot more in practice. I'm using it a lot more in games. I've scored my first goal with my weak foot, even striking from as much as 30 yards out. So the feedback was incredible. And this is something over the last 5 years that I've applied this comfort zone principle. I've experienced it with every single player that I've worked with. So it's actually, I'd say it's one of soccer's best hidden secrets. Um, yeah, a very revolutionary finding, but it has a huge impact because, I mean, let's be honest. Every single coach that I've talked to, you have more here in Germany in the youth Bundesliga. Over 90% of the players are not two-footed. Okay, and we're talking about the highest level of German youth soccer. So I talked to a coach from the Feyenoord Rotterdam Youth Academy a few weeks ago for the second time, Terence Arnold, and he said, "Wow, if this is true, this changes the world of soccer completely." Whereas, as my friend Ray Power, who also had me on his coaches development program, said to me about a year ago, he said, "Two-footedness is the next frontier. If we really get a significant number of players to be two-footed, this will change the game completely. It'll change the speed of the game. It'll change, then there's no more wrong foot. Every player becomes so much more unpredictable, more creative. There's so many more options. I mean, another buzzword that we talk about a lot these days, Craig, is polyvalence. So we're talking about developing hybrid players which can play at several different positions at the highest possible level. Well, the basic conditions to be able to do that is two-footedness. Okay, if you want to move a player and have him play on both sides, if he's two-footed, this becomes a lot easier. And now getting back a bit to what we spoke about at the beginning, Craig, the greatest part about this for me as a coach who wants the best for my players is to see the joy in the eyes of my players when they experiment this, Craig. I mean, this is incredible. When players and one of my players, Fabi, who's 12 years old, he had the most incredible thing happen to him just a few weeks ago. He went on to play with the state selection. He went to a practice session, and he's a right-footed player. So he felt so good about his left-footed foot, and he's a really smart kid. So he said, "I want to experiment." So all of the session, he only used his left foot. The whole session, everything with his left foot. Then his coach came and said, "Fabi, man, can you please start using your weak right foot?" I mean, if you hear, I was so amazed when I heard that. And Fabi, he is scoring so many goals with his left foot, Craig. It's incredible. His parents are amazed. I'm just about to finish module 2 with him. I just trained him again yesterday. He just scored another great goal yesterday, actually in a 5-2 victory of his team, which play at the highest level in our state. His coach is a certified Goals coach also. So yeah, this is catching on, and now one thing we haven't talked about, Craig, market value. Players that are two-footed, the market value is so much more higher. So there's lots of scouts and agents even reaching out to us and to Matthias Novak saying, "Can you train this player or that player?" Because they're looking at it from a business perspective. So that's a really, really cool thing. And for anybody, just when I showed the rabbit and the hunter to you, you were also trying to do it. Um, it's
Very
hard.
badly, but yeah,
It's hard, Craig. But
it
now
is.
imagine you have to do that when you're dribbling.
Yeah,
That's so tough.
yeah,
So it's very logical that that's going to create a very challenging feeling on your dominant foot. And that way, that's the secret to creating that provisional comfort zone on the weak foot. So it's and the good thing is about this, Craig, we've created a structure. So this is not something where you randomly try out different exercises. No, it's a clear step-by-step program. We've integrated a lot of motor learning, so our players, they end up moving a lot better. As a player told me, when I came to train with you, I felt like I was moving a bit like a robot with these square movement, and now everything is fluent. I feel like I've been born again as a player. So, and that's also something Matthias Novak says. He always says, Craig, movement talent first, soccer talent second. And that's something, I love the States. As I mentioned to you before, I was born in the States. Half of my life as a young person, I lived all over the States in different parts. So I have a great love for the US. I always say one of my dreams is for the World Cup in 2026 to become cognitive coach of the national team.
Nice.
um, but one thing that I always see in players in the US, they're very good athletically, but they don't move well. They really don't move well. It's like very athletic, lots of strength, but it's not really fluid, and there's not a lot of motor variability. There's not a lot of unexpected stuff they do. Very, very little. And so I think this kind of training has a great importance to the US. I'm probably flying over to the US in January, and I'll be sharing with several professional clubs about our concept. It'll be very interesting to see when and where and how. We've got, yeah, I'd say 10, 15 different cognitive goals coaches already in the States who are certified and doing some great stuff. But I think this is going to spread like a wildfire over the US, because that's a great thing about the US. I guess this is probably something you've experienced also in the US. People are very open to innovation. Parents want their kids to get better, to be the best that they can be. So they invest a lot. And while here in Germany and in Europe, since we have such a great soccer tradition, we sometimes think we know how things are done and we don't need to do anything new. That's a bit of the problem and the hole that we fell into after the World Cup in 2014.
Hmm.
And we've had a hard time lately. Although now with Julian Nagelsmann and Sandro Wagner as assistant coach, we're on our way up, and they really focus on cognitive and brain training. It's something they're very conscious of. Yeah.
And it's one of those things as well, like you kind of alluded to it earlier as well. It's not just a thing that's happening with youth players. This is something that is now integrated all the way up to the first team of like academy programs. I was watching Mikel Arteta the other day when he was just doing what most people would just perceive as a simple rondo before his session. But what he
Mm-hmm.
was doing was he had bean bags in his pocket and he would
Mm-hmm.
constantly throw them towards a player, so then that player had to worry about the ball that was being played in the rondo, but then also pick the beanbag up and throw it back to Mikel. So
Yeah.
it's a case of, as you
Mm-hmm.
say, training that brain to be able to, we're constantly as coaches
Yeah.
telling our players to scan the field, be
Mm-hmm.
aware of their surroundings. And these sort of things, these cognitive training is really helping players grow. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Felix, we're going to just take a short break, but when we come back, I'd love you to tell our listeners how they can get more involved with adding cognitive training into their sessions.
All right, let's do it.
Do you need fresh ideas for your football, soccer training? Then follow Session Share on YouTube and X. Our handles can be found in the show description. Session Share, for coaches, by coaches. Welcome back. We just spoke about the passion Felix has for Cognigoals, the deep learning. You've just spoken, Felix, about how you created the Cognigoals and how important it is to players. I honestly mean this. This is not just for this podcast. I'm deeply fixated with learning how this can impact my players back at home and helping us grow. And I'm sure the listeners are fascinated by how like this, I wouldn't say it's new because it's been going a while, but it's probably the new in terms of the relation of the age of soccer coaching or football coaching. So, how can coaches get involved with learning more about cognitive training?
Yeah, I mean that's why we created our courses, Craig. So what we've released in English are the first three modules, which makes you become a certified cognitive football coach level one. That's available online. Actually, there's a special off Black Friday offer going on right now. So the courses are, I think, at the cheapest price they've ever been. And yeah, if coaches reach out to me personally, then I might even give them my personal coupon on top. Um, so yeah, and it's very easily done, correct? Because you can do this anytime, anywhere, in any place, just at your own speed at home. Because once you purchase the courses, you get lifelong access. And we've just released the fourth module in German, so we're working on that to release it in English. We've already filmed 8 modules, so there's a lot more stuff coming up. We've even released a player course, which has the first 3 modules at a cheaper price for players. So we've released it for coaches, we've released it for their players, so they can train the stuff at home, and they can buy it together with their parents. And yeah, it's and especially talking about the two-footedness. This is actually really, really new. I mean, there's no comparable program available, and the great thing about it is, Craig, it just takes you and it leads you through the whole process step by step. We've got quizzes. Every exercise we provide a scientific background. We've got a glossary. It's huge, explaining all the scientific terms. So it's a fantastic certification course. On the feedback from our coaches who've done the course, we've gotten 9.7 stars out of 10 up to now. So the feedback has been amazing. Yeah, and the interest from all. I think we've had over 30 coaches from over 30 nations which have purchased the course material. And there's lots more stuff coming up. We're actually at the moment planning to open up our first Cognitive Goals Academy in the United States in 2025 to
Excellent.
provide like a lighthouse project. We've chosen a very special place in the US where the national youth teams are located, so you might know what I'm talking about. So we're in weekly talks about that. We're even thinking about bringing over Matthias Novak to become Academy Director. So I'm talking to him about that. Yeah, it's going to be a huge, huge thing for the US. And yeah, I mean, I'm dreaming. We've been world champions in Germany for 4 times. So Craig, it's time for the USA, right? I mean, the women's team has shown how to do it. So it's
They
time for
sure
the
have.
men.
Yeah.
And I think it's always being open to innovation, to doing something new, which will help to achieve performance leaps. You know, the old saying, if you keep doing the same things you're doing and expect different results, you're crazy. So you have to innovate, and that's where Cognigoals comes in. I think it's one of the most innovative, unique programs that are out, and we really target the hardware of the brain, as our scientists say. The whole player starts to perceive more. Something that they tell us all the time, Craig. After just a couple of weeks of training, they say, "Oh, the match is so much slower. Everything is so much slower." And of course, nothing has changed, but the processing speed has increased so much that they perceive everything to be slower. They take better decisions, they move better. It's amazing results. But don't take my word for it. Try it out yourself, coaches. And we're here to support you because let me also issue a brief warning. It is very innovative stuff. So this is not for just any coach, who wants to do some kind of standard stuff. You really have to dig deep and really understand the concepts and apply them the right way, because that ensures the right results. Yeah, so yeah, very, very, and we're open to any questions, Craig, Matthias Nowak, and myself. If there's any questions, you can find us on LinkedIn, on X. We love getting coaches involved, getting their questions. I'm releasing a lot of new exercises on Instagram, just challenges to just show what our training is all about, and have your players try it, and you'll see that it just trains a different part that's not usually trained. It just focuses on the brain. So it's sort of a lot of stuff, Craig. It looks like technical training, but you always have to remember it's all about training the brain. really making players that have the cognitive skills to play at the highest possible level. And there's specialized athletic training, there's specialized technical training, there's specialized tactical training, and I believe the time has come for specialized cognitive training to really, fine tune and develop the cognitive skills of the players to be able to perform at the highest level. And the speed of the game, as of modern life, Craig, it's become so complex, it's become so fast. And so these are skills, as many of our parents have told us, um, um, that they don't only help with football, soccer, they help with life itself. So, we've had feedbacks from parents of, I just talked to a parent yesterday who told me that ever since training with us, the kid has improved so much at school, he's got straight A's. Um, and it's logical. If this stuff helps the brain, the executive function of the brain, of course it's going to improve. I mean, there's lots of studies which show that the executive functions of a child, they determine more success in school and in life than the IQ. Okay, so if you can train that, go for it. And yeah, so it's um, the offer's out there, and let's see who takes up the challenge. And let me repeat, it's not easy. You have to dig in and really renew your mind and be able to do stuff you've never done before. But that's what all revolutions in sports are made of. So
And at the
here
end of
you
the
go.
day, it's always been the case of if it's worth learning or worth doing, it's never been easy, has it? Like we've
Yeah.
found that with all of our jobs. And just for our listeners as well, I will make sure that in the podcast description, I'll put all Felix's details in for, like, as he say, his Twitter account, LinkedIn, and all the above that we mentioned. So, Felix, on a lighter note, I always like to ask our coaches to see where like their kind of like passion began. Can you tell us what your favorite moment was in sports? It can be as a player, a fan, a coach.
There are many. There are many, Craig. Playing 1v1 with my dad in the garden, I'll never forget that. It's one of my earliest, it's actually my earliest positive childhood memory. I love the ball. I love balls of any kind. I've got a basketball uh, set up in my garden. I can't, walk by without shooting some hoops. I have this deep love for the ball. Now, and I've loved sports all my life, different sports. One of the absolute highlights that just comes to my mind, Craig, is 2014 semifinals, Germany Brazil.
Mm.
I
7-2,
was
that
watching
one,
this.
right?
I was watching this next door, next just a room next door here in our basement. Man, this was one of the most beautiful soccer experiences of all my life, and I've always had a great love for Brazilian soccer, no question. But the way that German team, also from a brain perspective, the way there was like a collective rhythm in that team, and we celebrated the 3-0, 3-0 so much that like the remote control made the screen go off, and then we put it back on, and they scored again. We thought it was like a replay, but it was the 4-0. I mean, Craig, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. That was so touching. On a personal level, and I'll leave it at that. Another moment that comes to my mind. Um, when we moved to Washington D.C. In ninth grade, I attended Walt Whitman High School, and there were basketball tryouts, and I said, "Yeah, I want to try out." And all my American friends, they said, "Man, you're German. Come on, what are you gonna do? Go play some soccer." And I said, "No, no, I'm gonna." And there were like almost 200 kids trying out for that. And I ended up making the team. And we ended up that year, we were undefeated. We won every game. We won the county championship. I played every game. And that was, for me, from a sports perspective, one of the proudest moments. Just to have made it as a German, to have made it onto that team, to represent my high school, and to be part of such a great team. Because it's the first time in the history of Walt Whitman High School that one of their freshman teams went undefeated
Wow,
and that
great.
it won the county championship. So that was also amazing.
And also to
Yeah,
prove your friends wrong as well, right?
ab- Absolutely. No, and there's many for me, Craig. I love sports. I love the joy and the passion it can bring to your life. So yeah, for me, it's something very precious, and that's what I try to pass on to my players. And I always tell them, and for them, when you become a professional or when you play for a German youth national team, Craig, it's serious stuff. The competition is very tough. But I always tell the players, don't do too much. Take breaks, especially when you're injured. Don't play injured, and make sure that the love and the passion in your heart for the game keeps burning bright. Because I see so many professional players and so many talented youth players, they lose the passion, lose the love, and that's the most precious thing of all. And if you end up losing that, what are you doing there? You in it for the money? Come on, no, it's called the beautiful game for a reason. So that's what I always keep trying to tell them. Take risks, be courageous, because that's also something, Craig, that we're missing in modern soccer. It's become so much of a chess game that actually, for me, when I go to the stadium or when I watch games on TV, it's sometimes very boring because I can predict almost everything. Where are the dribblers? Where's the courageous players that take risks, that go 1v1 or 2 or 3, that, mesmerize the fans with their skills and their tricks? And that's actually another thing, Craig, that Cognigoals is all about. We want to develop that kind of new two-footed, game intelligent, and creative player generation that gets football fans to really, they go to the stadium just to see that kind of players playing. So keeping the beautiful game beautiful.
I love that. This has been fantastic, but that's about all we have for the episode. I feel like we could go on for hours, me and you, Felix. That is fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. For our listeners, be sure to get in touch across all our socials to offer your opinions on all that has been discussed. You can find the social media platforms we use in our podcast description, as well as I said, Felix's details. This has been Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. Thank you once again, Felix, for a fantastic episode.
My pleasure, Craig. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed every moment of it.
Welcome. And thank you all for listening. And as Felix would say, thank you for coaching the beautiful game.